All right, now I want to welcome in friend of this show, Aly Trost, radio host and sports reporter at Sports Radio 810 Kansas City. Aly, how are you? How's everything going with your quarantining? And when are sports coming back?
Well, for starters, my quarantine's been going pretty well so far. Got the whole at-home work setup going. The only thing that's difficult, I live in a studio apartment, so 500 square feet can get pretty cramped when you are forced to stay inside for so long. But definitely looking forward to sports coming back. A huge part of my job is going out to practices each week, covering games and other live events. So while I've still had a lot to do and a lot to talk about, it's definitely been tough not having that face-to-face human interaction that I'm so used to and have been throughout my entire career. So it's been kind of tough on that front, but fingers crossed that we'll see sports returning very, very soon.
So what did you do, especially just for the draft? How did you guys do I know a lot of some of the Redskins players were doing like Zoom interviews with the local media. Was that similar to what you were doing?
Yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs did a fantastic job getting all of that set up for us with the Dropbox, with all of the video and audio files after each Zoom conference concluded. And that definitely made our jobs a lot easier. I host a radio show each Saturday. And during the draft, that was obviously a pretty big day. The Chiefs made, I want to say 4 picks up to that point before making there were 3 on the final day, I believe it was. So there was, a lot to talk about. And thankfully, we had access to all of the audio and kind of quotes from not just players, but from general manager Brett Veach, Andy Reid, the head coach, the owner, Clark Hunt. So a lot of great resources there. And yeah, just literally covered the entire draft from my couch and from my desk.
So were you live for the day 3? You were live, just hearing it in real time and just kind of reacting on the fly?
So my show was in the morning before.
Okay.
The actual draft portion actually started, but we had live coverage throughout every night of the draft. So
that's wild.
Our radio personalities were, giving live analysis, and really our focus was more so doing our analysis and our news breaking as it relates to the Chiefs, obviously keeping up with what picks are happening when, but focusing mainly on how it would impact the Chiefs and then also the division as well in the AFC West.
So prior to the draft, what kind of stuff were you guys just mostly focusing on? Pre-draft stuff, or were you focusing on like the baseball potentially coming around the course? Just kind of just draft prep for the past couple of weeks as you've been quarantining?
We've been talking everything. It's funny working in sports right now. A lot of people assume, oh, there's no live sports going on. What on earth are you guys talking about? Well, there's a ton to talk about. I mean, you can either take the approach of talking through some of the proposals that different teams and organizations are throwing out there. Major League Baseball, for one, has been incredibly vocal on what they think, they might do in terms of getting baseball back. So they've been pretty open with sharing some of those proposals and whatnot. Major League Soccer has a couple that they're tossing around. So kind of analyzing those, what would work, what wouldn't, taking the time to do some longer form deep dive interviews with players, coaches, media members, and then obviously with the draft focusing on that heavily as well. So a lot of my pre-draft, lead up was going through mock drafts, which is kind of a hit or miss either way, right? You kind of just break down which players would be the best fits based on the needs and kind of where players would go. There were a couple of shockers there, but yeah, just, prepared by looking at where the Chiefs needed to add depth and then kind of looking at certain players that would be a good fit and making sure that, up to speed on all of those things. So overall, it was a really fun couple of days. Was kind of missing that live adrenaline rush that you get when there's an event happening in real time. So looking forward to, when that returns in the actual game playing setup. But, I think there are a lot of things from this draft that I would like to see down the road and things that, I think would be worth keeping around. I loved the authenticity of the reactions, getting to see players in their childhood home with their families. I thought that kind of added an element that we don't usually get to see in the NFL. NFL kind of has this air of stuffiness at times where, you might, it seems to be always a bit more of a production than some other sports are. And so I kind of liked, peeling back the layers, Roger Goodell in his big leather chair, kind of getting comfortable reading the picks. And I just felt like it was more relatable. So I hope that maybe they take this experience and use it to influence future drafts and other things.
Absolutely. I think the whole production of it went fantastic. I think, especially when it's something you've never done before, there's going to be flaws. You got two different networks. I know ABC was doing a broadcast with some of the college football guys. ESPN, NFL Network, I know they had Kurt Warner and Jeremiah in there, and they were kind of doing a little bit of everything. The one thing I kept noticing, I don't really hear anybody talking about it, is they kept cutting to Louis Riddick, and nobody really said anything, but his delay was like 6 seconds longer than everybody. I'm like, wait, all right. And but it was, I think it was great. Bill Belichick's scouting department might be the best in the NFL. That Husky was fantastic, but like I think it went really, really well. They could definitely, because the thing is, I don't know if they're going to be able to have a live draft next year, and they don't know if they're going to be able to have a live draft next year. If they need to take some elements from this and put it into that, I think they've got a lot of stuff to work with. Maybe just connection speeds, maybe the technology will be better, but I think they have a really good product. And I think what they can do is, since they normally only have maybe 40, 50 people in the green room, maybe they can send out, they've already got all these home studio kits, send them out to the guys that aren't invited to the green room. You can have all the guys come up on the stage, and for the guys, maybe third or fourth rounders, they've got kits and you can just see live reactions with their families. I think it'd be great.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think, speaking to kind of the Lou Riddick delay, that was really bad. I think, it kind of made me realize that maybe the most essential part of the draft broadcast is, making sure that the analysts are in a better setup and, more studio-like situation than their own homes. But there are definitely parts of it that work. So I think it's, like you said, next year, if they are forced to do another virtual draft, kind of already having this as a really good guide, I think, moving forward for having all of, all things considered, everything that could have gone wrong. I think, it turned out pretty well. And I was thoroughly impressed with the minor number of issues that popped up when really everyone was expecting it to kind of be this bleep show, if you know what I'm saying. So
yeah, I thought it went really, really well, and then they kind of groomed it. Personally, I know there's somebody who's floating the idea. I think it was Adam Schefter was floating the idea of maybe doing one round a night, but like that'd be great for the first 4 rounds. And you're like, where's this guy from? But I think it went really, really well. And do you think Burrow seemed excited to be selected by Cincinnati? Like, he must have heard that might have been a possibility.
It's, I think like one of my favorite parts leading up to the draft every year, and not just when it's virtual, all the smoke screens, like all like the kind of chatter that's being put out, whether it's by the teams themselves or just speculation. And there was the whole conversation around Miami, what they were going to do with their pick, were they going to trade up to get Tua, was he going to fall to number 5, like all of those things. But with Joe Burrow, what was interesting is that the Cincinnati Bengals organization did want him to have that moment. So, they didn't necessarily, I believe what I read was that they waited to give him the call on the night, which I think is, however you want to go about it. Everyone knew, though, that Joe Burrow was going number 1 overall to the Bengals. Like, everyone knew it. So it didn't really matter what the Bengals were saying, trying to make it sound like, they weren't going to make an official announcement or release anything that would definitively say whether or not they were going to pick him at number 1 overall. Everyone knew that was going to happen. It just, that was the thing. But I loved getting to see inside Joe Burrow's living room from that pick in that moment, him standing up for the national anthem and all those things. I think, one, great pick. I'm excited to see what Cincinnati's able to do, and Joe Burrow translating his skills from the college level to the NFL. I'm really interested to see what he's able to do. I'm always intrigued by first year, quarterbacks straight out of the draft, straight out of college, how they're able to adjust. We've seen some flops, we've seen some successes. So I think he'll be a fun one to watch. And Tua as well. I hope Tua gets a little bit of time to recover if he needs to, but I don't anticipate that being the case down in Miami.
There was definitely more than 10 people in Tua's house. Like, they were hiding in the kitchen. They were hiding in the basement. You give me a break. But like with that, I thought that he knew he was going to be going there. It was predetermined. And Tua, the tanking for Tua has been going on since a couple of years ago in the national championship. You knew it was going to happen. There was going to be smoke screen. You knew, but nobody was trading up. He was going to follow them. And the one thing I love that they're like, oh, there's no way we're going to get any medical people to check him out. Really? You don't think you're going to drop a quarterback in the top 5 with hip, ankle, knee concerns, and you're not going to get a doctor to him? You're going to pay a $5,000 fine to go check out the future of your franchise. Come on. So it's wild.
I think, it's a good pick. How do you pass on Tua? It's a risk whether you take him or if you don't take him, right? Like if you don't take him, he gets picked up by, say, the Chargers, and then he goes on to be a stud quarterback in the NFL, right up there with Patrick Mahomes and the likes of some of the other best of all time to play. Might be a little too soon to say that for Mahomes, but hey, I'm in Kansas City, and I think he's done a pretty good job so far. But, it's a risk if you take him, and it's a risk if you don't. And I think the bigger risk was to not take him. So I think it was a good move overall by the Dolphins. And to your point, yeah, they're going to do their due diligence beforehand, even if it's going to cost them more to do it in the current state that we're living in versus, maybe if things are a bit more normal.
And speaking of the Chargers, is anybody in the division starting to scare you with either free agent move, somebody they've signed, or anybody they've drafted? I don't know if Justin Herbert's giving you nightmares or anything, but I think you guys should be okay. But is anybody kind of getting your attention?
I would honestly say I think the Broncos would be the one team where I'm a little bit more intrigued than the others, and here's why. I think with the Chargers, you're not going to see Justin Herbert come in, and I don't think he's going to take the starting role from Tyrod Taylor. I think he's going to kind of sit behind him for a year, maybe take some time to develop and learn, how the pro system works and just kind of get more acclimated. The Chargers have a good defense. I don't think Tyrod Taylor is going to come in and compete right off the bat with Patrick Mahomes. And even though the Chargers do have some offensive pieces that are pretty solid, Austin Eckler being one of them, Chargers don't scare me as much. The Raiders they picked up some key pieces on the receiving end for their offense, but Derek Carr is not going to be the quarterback that's going to lead them to a successful run. On the other hand, though, with the Broncos, what I'm intrigued to see with them is that we haven't seen a lot from Drew Lock so far. Granted, he did kind of have a bit of a meltdown, if you want to call it, in the snow game against the Chiefs at Arrowhead, but before that, he was 2-0 as a starting quarterback for the Broncos. And I think what the Broncos did in this draft was really smart, in that they loaded him up with weapons, and they're kind of using this season as like a hey, show us what you got. Are you the future or are you not? It's not like the Packers, where they haven't drafted a wide receiver in the first round for Aaron Rodgers in the last, 15 years. This is, I think, the best move possible because they have a young quarterback, a quarterback who showed a lot of potential in that last season. And even though the Broncos weren't going to make the playoffs, they still got to see a nice peek as to what Drew Lock could potentially be for them. And so I think by selecting, Jerry Jeudy and then bringing in the tight end Alberto from Mizzou and then the wide receiver from Penn State, making sure that they were using some of those picks to give Drew Lock, in addition to the players that they already have on this offense, some options. And if he's not able to make anything happen with that, then maybe they know that quarterback is a position that they need to keep looking at and keep working towards finding that guy for them. And so I think that was the one team in the AFC West that, it has the potential to be a bust, and it has the potential to have a lot of upside because Drew Lock has a lot of talent. And I say this being a Missouri girl, and, there was definitely some hard times with him at Mizzou, but is this, where he's going to thrive? And by giving him the weapons, you'll be able to know definitively, okay, did we give this guy everything that he would possibly need to succeed? If you can say yes, and then he still doesn't succeed, well, then again, if you might need to move on from him or not sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think the Broncos might be one of the most up-and-coming teams to watch this year, just what they did to the offense. You already saw what Noah Fant did last year. They got Sutton from SMU a couple of years ago. He's really coming to his own. Brought in Jerry Jeudy. He's one of the best route runners you've seen in a long time. Then they went on and grabbed KJ Hamler from Penn State, who's a burner. Then they're comparing him to Deshaun Jackson. Then you grabbed Alberto, as you were saying, who already has a rapport with Drew Lock, which is very interesting. I think they're going to be a fun team to watch this year. But you were kind of second-guessing the Raiders. Are you not expecting Nathan Peterman to explode in year number 2?
With the Raiders, I really just think it all comes back to Derek Carr. And I think with where the NFL is going, you have to get that quarterback position right. You can have and this is my favorite way to describe a Patrick Mahomes, for example. One of the local beat writers in Kansas City calls him a force multiplier. He's able to take players who aren't necessarily these star standout receivers and bring them into the game and make the most out of everything. Andy Reid is able to scheme up things that bring players into the game, schemes them open, and puts players in position to be successful. When you pair those two together, you're going to have a successful offense, whether you have the number one wide receiver or whether you would, like, if you don't. Like, that's just kind of how Kansas City operates. Derek Carr, you can surround him with as much talent. They take Henry Ruggs III, and you can surround him with talent. I just don't, from what we've seen with Derek Carr, he's not going to take the Raiders to the next level. But he's another quarterback where I think it's going to be another situation where, okay, we brought in some more weapons. Is this going to be a season where you can make something out of it, or is this going to be another kind of reassurance for us that maybe the quarterback position is what we still need to look into? All teams in the AFC West right now are chasing the Chiefs, and all the teams in the AFC West right now have the one thing don't have the one thing that the Chiefs have, and that's Patrick Mahomes. And I think as the NFL progresses, it's going to really just continue coming down to the quarterback. What we're seeing now, the Chiefs fell behind in all three of their postseason games before winning the Super Bowl. You can't win on a solid defense, but you can win when you have a quarterback who can make big plays happen in a short amount of time, and that's how you win games now. So yeah, you see the Ravens and what they did. They had a nice run, but what it showed in the end was that it wasn't enough to get them to where everyone thought they were going, and that's a Super Bowl. So I think the model is shifting, and as it always is going to in the NFL, you're going to see different, things be successful. And right now, the thing that's the most successful is having a quarterback who can just kind of do a little bit of everything. And then they add a Clyde Edwards-Helaire into the mix, who is not only a great running back, but also pretty darn good receiver as well. His route running ability, pass catching ability, he's going to add another layer to an already really dangerous offense. So yeah, the other teams in the AFC West, they might be trying to put up some points, try to win on offense, but the Chiefs are continuing to invest in theirs. So it'll be tough.
Absolutely. And speaking of the Chiefs, so you were covering them this season. They had the first Super Bowl, and I don't even know how long. You went to all the games. You told me you went to the Super Bowl. So what was that? Just that feeling like before the game even commenced, you had a good feeling. They were the overarching favorites. What was just that energy like being around there in Miami with all the buzz?
Yeah, so I was down in Miami for the week leading up to the Super Bowl, so Radio Row, and then I got back into Kansas City on Friday night, and then I had a show Saturday, and then Sunday with the actual Super Bowl, I was emceeing a huge watch party in downtown DC, which was unbelievable. But the energy leading up to the Super Bowl, I think the craziest part was that, one, the team you're covering is the one that everyone's talking about. So when you're sitting down doing these interviews, you're talking about a team that you covered all season with some of, the nation's top, analysts, reporters, talk show hosts, all of those things. So it was really special. And I don't know what it was. There was something about this team where I almost want to say them falling behind the way that they did in the Texans game 24-0, and then them falling behind even in the AFC Championship game to the Titans as well. There was something about having overcome that adversity that even if the Chiefs did fall behind in the Super Bowl, everyone still had the confidence that they had what it took to come back. And I think that was the difference maker. This team, the defense started out a little shaky. Granted, they had a new defensive coordinator in Steve Spagnuolo who was, working to get the team on the same page. They switched from a 3-4 to a 4-3 that they operated under Bob Sutton with. And then, they bring in all these new players. So there are all these moving pieces. You also have to factor in the injuries that they dealt with early in the season. Frank Clark, Chris Jones, and a couple others in the mix. So I think, the energy was really a lot. It was very confident talking with the players. And then I think the one thing for me, and seeing it in the Super Bowl and then seeing it in those come from behind games, was just the leadership. They had a special way about them that when they were behind, no one ever believed that they were truly out. And I think it's pretty remarkable that a young quarterback like Patrick Mahomes could have the sense to rally his team in those situations. He's the one directing everything, right? When the offense is on the field, the fact that he was still able, to keep that belief that, hey, yeah, we might be trailing by 10 points, by 20 points, but we're not out of this yet. Knock it off, get it together. We're going to go win this game. And so I think because of that, the energy and the confidence was really, really high. That's not to say I wasn't freaking out a little bit in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl when the Chiefs were trying to come back and get ahead of the 49ers. But I think it just felt like it was the year of destiny. There were a bunch of, different random storylines that went into it. It just felt like it was the year, and it happened to be that.
Even though it was almost 3 months ago, it feels like it was so much longer than that. You were like there, and then I know you were at the watch party. How long ago does it feel like for you?
Literally feels like 10 years ago. I can't believe that event happened in the same calendar year that we are currently in right now. It truly blows my mind. And I have a hard time to so for example, this is what really trips me up. When Kobe Bryant passed away, that happened before the Super Bowl. And for whatever reason in my mind, those two events already seemed so distant because of how, strange and difficult that was for everybody. And that I can't, there's no concept of time right now. So for me, I can't even fathom that was 3 months ago and in the same calendar year that we are currently in right now. So feels like forever.
Yeah, speaking of the Kobe Bryant thing, it still doesn't feel real. It's kind of like this. I would say there's a few people in the world that they impact so many people and they touch so many lives, regardless of what they do, that they feel like they're immortal. I mean, you've seen it in recent years. I think the ones that really kind of catch out because you remember where you were when that happened. And I think he's just such an influential figure, somebody just larger than life. And then you had the game that next week, and then a few weeks later, the country's shutting down, and you're just like, what is going on right here? But it's wild. And when you're talking about how the days you can't really the days really don't matter anymore. I've kind of figured out it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for sure. I'm I can't wait to get back to. And the other thing too, working in sports, oftentimes you use okay, there's a game this Saturday, or I have there are so many different events throughout your week that kind of help keep you on track with what day it is, even that, it's okay, there's a press conference, I have this, on this day. And now it's just, everything's so fluid that it's hard to wake up and know exactly, for example, I literally wrote that it was Tuesday today. It's not.
Oh, you're right. Wow, that got me on that. Yeah, it's honestly because Super Bowl Sunday and then the draft were the only real days you really had to remember in that span, and that's wild. It's insane. That's interesting. That's wild. And then so for this coming season, I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. We don't know when this thing's going to end. You know it is going to end. So that's a good thing. You know it's going to end. And even if it's still not the same when it does come back, I do think football is going to play because I think the guys will, even if there's a lot of risk, I think they'll get them as ready as possible. They'll have all the medical procedures. I don't think fans will be there. But if it does happen and we do have the season, regardless of how long it is, who's the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs in 2020?
Ooh, that's a good question, because a lot of this is going to depend on how successful some teams' drafts were, right?
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see. I think the Ravens had a great draft, and they're a team that they fell short last season. I think they addressed some key needs, and then I'm just interested to see, can Lamar Jackson replicate that same success? Patrick Mahomes did have I hate saying a down year after his NFL MVP title, but he did miss a couple games with the dislocated knee injury, and the numbers were just insane his first, year as a starter, that it seemed, almost more logical to say that he wouldn't repeat those kind of numbers. But I'm interested to see if Lamar Jackson can replicate that same success. I think, you look at the way that the season ended for them, and there's a lot that can be learned. And I think a lot of maturity as well. So and also, the big question with the Ravens is, can the way that they operate on offense, does it have a lot of longevity there? Can they keep that up? Is it sustainable? So I'm interested to see how that translates into this next season. And I think that's a big question mark for the Chiefs as well. The Chiefs didn't have to see them in the postseason, which is pretty crazy to think about. That's definitely a team that a lot of Chiefs fans and everyone in Kansas City was a little worried about them having to go up against. Aside from the Ravens, though, I mean, if we're looking at the AFC West in particular, I already talked about the Broncos. The only reason they're a team that sticks out to me is because of all, the unknowns. We haven't really gotten to see Drew Lock as an NFL quarterback in at least a large enough sample size to say if he's going to be a threat or not. And then, look at the weapons that they've added on offense. I'm also just excited to see, just looking at the league in general, I'm really interested to see what happens with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, you bring back Rob Gronkowski, Tom Brady, getting shipped off there is just crazy in and of itself. But, I think the one thing with that team is it's a big question mark. They've got weapons for Tom Brady, but is Rob Gronkowski going to come back and be as impressive of a player and as, dangerous as he was when he was at his best? His last season, he had a completely down year. He suffered some injuries. Is he really just truly refreshed and completely healthy coming back? Tom Brady's in his, early to approaching mid 40s. Is this guy going to be able to, does he have enough in the tank to keep it going? But I think there's, intriguing storylines there. I also think that the Arizona Cardinals, I think that's a bit of a sleeper team in terms of, they've got Kyler Murray at quarterback, Cliff Kingsbury kind of running that offense. And then they bring in a guy like DeAndre Hopkins from the Texans. And I think that could be a team that, as they continue to add pieces and grow and develop, could be a pretty solid team in the next couple of years, if not sooner.
And then before I let you go, who is somebody, the team, you've seen the players, you're all there all the time. Who's somebody under the radar you think could break out this year? Well, I wish I would have asked you this before the Super Bowl. I actually did a prop bet. I said that Tyrann Mathieu was going to pick off Garoppolo. Turns out it was just the two former Redskins I used to watch all the time that never did it. But so I'm not, I got no ill will. But no, yeah. So who's somebody that either they picked up in free agency or somebody really didn't have a big role last year, this year, that you're like, all right, this guy's on the rise?
I'd have to say last year's rookie receiver, Mccole Hardman, who the Chiefs traded up to take in last year's draft at number 56. He came in, and originally when he was drafted, it was kind of with the intent that he might have to replace Tyreek Hill due to all of the uncertainty at the time with some of the legal issues and other things that were going on with him and as it, concerned the Chiefs. So Mccole Hardman comes in and has a great rookie season and did a ton for the team, not just within the offense, but on special teams as well. And he's someone who's, even if you're looking just kind of at the depth chart, he was doing all of this on a limited number of snaps. This is a guy who had, averaged 11.5 yards after the catch per reception last year, 6 touchdowns. Again, had that huge return against the Texans in the divisional round game on special teams that, in my opinion, really turned the game around. I think he's a player who has a huge upside, in my opinion. I think he's got a lot of potential, and we got to see a really good look at what he has a potential to be, again, in a limited number of snaps and in a limited number of, situations where I think that there's still, a lot to be seen and learned with him. And now that he's had a year playing with Patrick Mahomes, a year in this offense, a year as a pro, more importantly, I think we could see big things from him coming up in 2020, which will be really big for the Chiefs because they've got 2 receivers on 1-year deals, Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson. They're going to have to really look at that group again, next draft and then in free agency going forward because, when those players are gone, if they end up costing too much, they're going to depend on guys like Mccole Hardman and some other young ones to come up and fill those roles.
I'm excited. I wish football would start tomorrow, but hopefully we're fingers crossed September. And I'm going to see Patrick Mahomes get back on the field. But I really wanted to thank you again for coming on today. And then how can people reach you on social media and follow your show on Saturdays?
Yeah, so you can check me out on social media. Really simple, at Aly Trost, ALYTROST. I tweet quite a bit, so you can hop in and conversation. I love Twitter. On my show, you can either stream it live on 810WHB.com. Again, that's located in Kansas City at Sports Radio 810 on Twitter. We've got an app, 810WHB. You can stream, get the podcasted version after the show if you can't listen live. But I am on air from 9 to 11 a.m. on Saturday mornings.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon. But I really, really appreciate it.